Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. It's not hunched. Its head is going straight into its shoulders. 12th of October 2020. Now this winter and spring we've had a flurry of new wildman reports, as you know. And in each event there's been a face-to-face sighting with the creature. So these reports are not misidentification or mistakes. The reports have come in from very credible witnesses who were not out looking for the experience when the unexpected happened. Here is one lady's experience in her own words. I wasn't sure about approaching you with my sighting that occurred last year, but it's been on my mind to do so for the last few weeks. I've already been talking with one of your earlier witnesses who's been helping me with this. But in conversation with her, I mentioned how hearing other people's encounters really helps when you're researching yourself, and how sometimes an almost throwaway comment from one person's experience can be a big puzzle piece for somebody else. She says, my experience may fall into this category as it's what you'd call unconventional, but he was very close and he stayed in sight for a good amount of time, and I hope it may be of value to add to your records. I'll get straight to the point of what I mean when I say unconventional. The forest being, Sasquatch, I saw was what I believe to be cloaked. He was almost solid black in colour, but he was so close I was able to make out, in part, I could see him, see the foliage behind him, right through him, as though he was a shadow or slightly phased out. I appreciate that this community is still divided between flesh and blood Sasquatch, and that Sasquatch potentially have other gifts, and this being part of the reason I haven't shared my encounter before now. But on researching, I've been really surprised at just how many people have experienced encounters like mine. And I wish she'd have contacted me earlier, because I would have told her that my opinion has changed greatly over the years. I used to be convinced it was just flesh and blood, it could be no more. But I don't feel like that now. I think, and I've seen and I've heard far too many things that would keep me thinking that. Well, we get back to this lady's account. She said, I also experienced another anomaly that day, which I'll also mention, because this is something that I've personally not heard anyone mention before, and I feel it may be useful to have on record, but I'll cover what I saw first. My sighting occurred on the 12th of October 2020. I was researching a forest that I've had many experiences in over the last few years. I was headed towards the exit and was a bit anxious to be leaving, due to reasons I'll mention in a bit. It was near dusk, and it had started to rain again, which meant I was losing light fast. Plus, due to lockdowns, I was out researching on my own. But I had a great day and had found some great structures, etc. So all was good. It was at that point that I caught movement slightly ahead and to my left. And when I turned, I saw a forest being, a Sasquatch, run into the shrub line inside the wooded area to my left, and he ran right past me until he was out of sight. He was no more than 25 feet away, if that. It was the shock of it more than anything. Although I'm out researching them, it doesn't quite prepare you for seeing one. At no point did I feel threatened or anything. Didn't feel anything negative. I was just a bit shocked. Though my sighting lasted just a handful of seconds, it felt like an age, especially as my brain was trying to process what I was seeing. I can still recall my thought process as though it just happened, but it's probably easier to share this so you can also understand a little better what I saw. It went something like this. Oh my God, I've seen one. And it's running, it's hunched over. Its head's in exactly the same place as ours. It's not domed as you'd expect. It's not hunched. Its head is going straight into its shoulders, making him look hunched. I can see through it. It's a shadow, as I can see right through it. Wait a minute. If that's just a shadow, where the heck is whatever is causing it? I can't see that. Oh no, it's not a shadow. It's solid. He's cloaked. He's gliding. There's very little up and down in his movement. It's rippled. What the heck? He's moving fast. He's gone. I can't see him now. Oh my God, I saw a Sasquatch. Now that forest section was flat and level with the footpath, and I didn't have to look up at all. So allowing for distance, I guess his height was 5'10" to 6 foot tall. His outline was clear, and though I couldn't see facial features, definition was clear enough to say that he was male. The hunch posture still gets me. I've read of this, but it's hard to explain. It makes their silhouette seem almost bizarre, like an amalgamation of man and something not man. The top line was one of an unbroken curve. For a person to achieve this outline, you would have to be running head down or doubled over almost in a running, slouching position. Yet the torso of what I saw was mainly upright and only tipped slightly forward. The speed was similar to a fast jog. He seemed effortless, as though he could maintain that speed for hours. There wasn't much swing to his arms either. Nothing like that arm swing you see in the Patterson footage. For a human to achieve this speed this fella was moving at, and looking so relaxed at it, a human would be pumping his arms quite literally. His colour was almost black, with the branches and foliage behind him appearing through him as a colour similar to slate grey. I could see dark greens and browns, and I'm guessing these colours belonged to the background and were not his, though his colour could have been a brown or a black. There was no sound. It had been showering on and off all day, which may explain why his footfall was silent, but I remember being surprised that I wasn't hearing any movement of foliage as he passed close enough to be touching at least some of it. And I was really close. I should have heard at least some movement. It may sound cliche, but with no wind or animal sounds, the woods were noticeably silent anyway. His head was upright and looking forward, and it was slightly turned to his right, as if he was about to change direction as he went out of sight. I didn't have time to notice his legs. I saw from top thigh upwards, so either he was running behind the shrubs, or I simply spent so much time trying to work out that top line that I didn't get a chance to notice. His build was solid and thick-set, even though he was moving athletically. The ripple in the movement was odd. At one point, a single ripple passed through him vertically from front to back. My initial thought at the time, as I saw this ripple, was that it looked like they can bend light. I saw him cover a distance of around 30 feet or a bit less, but with little movement up and down. I have no idea how many strides that took him, but I get the impression that it wasn't too many. He was heading away from the entrance and moving back into the forest. And that's about as much as I can remember from the encounter. Do these beings really have the ability to cloak? I can only say what I saw, and that was that an approximately 6 foot tall, black shadow Sasquatch ran right past me. If he'd only been 10 foot deeper into the woods, I wouldn't have been able to see that. I wouldn't have been able to see his cloaking. I wouldn't have been able to see at all what was going on. So I guess I was meant to see it. He made no effort to hide or increase his speed at all, or duck deeper into the woods on seeing me. He appeared at a running jog slightly in front of me and then ran past me in full view, no more than 25 feet away, before disappearing into the forest. I certainly feel honoured that he chose to show himself to me that day. When you go out researching, you see things and you hear things and experience things, but until you see one, you're only guessing at what may be causing those experiences. I now have had the sighting to validate those experiences, and though it wasn't a flesh and blood sighting, I have no doubt as to what I saw, which was, to me, unmistakably, a forest being, a Sasquatch. I did a sketch of what I saw, and I've attached it. It's far from brilliant, the head's far too forward and the torso's too upright, but it's close. I'll also attach some stills of that section that I saw him in. I had my camera on in less than 2 seconds after he passed me. Not quick enough to photograph him, but it has the area at near exact time. And mention this next part just in case it's relevant. There was another incident that happened that day. Before my sighting, I was searching one section of woods that had many structures, like pinned arches and teepees within it. I ended up losing the path. I got turned around. And when I realised that I couldn't find the path, I went to plan B, which was basically, if I got lost, to head west and I'd find my way out. Now, I did this following my compass as close to true west as I could. But after what felt like a considerable amount of time, I realised my situation was going from bad to worse. It was getting darker, and I only had about an hour until full dark, and the undergrowth and shrubbery was getting to the point of being impassable. As strange as it sounds, I then got the thought that was to turn around as I was heading in the wrong direction and to go back the way I'd come. That thought was very clear. This was a bit of a low point, as this meant I'd been heading east, the opposite direction to which I needed to be going. As I couldn't get much further, I turned around. I wasn't happy about it, and I began heading east. What felt like less than 10 minutes after that, to my relief and surprise, I found the original path out. It doesn't sound that interesting until I stepped out of the woods and back onto the main path. Still needed to find the main exit. I looked at my compass again to find that it had flipped, and what movements before had been telling me full east, it now said full west. I'd basically been going in the wrong direction all that time, following my compass. I've since bought a good quality compass, but the one I had used that day still remains accurate and true. It was correctly calibrated. I'll say that again. It was correctly calibrated, and I've never experienced this before or since. I only mention this as it happened before my sighting. Fortunately, I rejoined the main path just as a helpful dog walker was going past, who was able to confirm where the exit was. And by extension, that my compass was now giving a true direction. I seem to have experienced a magnetic anomaly, and I have to then ask, is there a possibility that this was connected to my sighting? I even began wondering if they do in fact use portals or something that's made my compass off. Anyway, that was a side note to my sighting. I left with the impression after my sighting that he had been either hanging around or following me to the exit to make sure I actually managed to find it without getting lost again. I was quite close to the exit when I had my sighting, and he was running away from the exit and back into the forest. The almost 2D appearance of what I saw was quite accurate, but I came away with the conclusion that it was like a solid shadow. I've been over it, and I can't pinpoint why I came to that conclusion. I'm guessing it's something I noticed subconsciously. Maybe it was light. Maybe as he passed me, I saw the beginnings of a rear view as well. I just can't pinpoint it. Experience would sound to some like someone who had got herself lost in the woods and whose anxiety then led to her seeing something fanciful. I can't stress enough that this wasn't the case. I was relieved to know where the exit was and that I wouldn't have to try and find it in the dark. But I was in a great mood. I'd had a great day. I'd found some great signs and structures. I'd even heard a loud thump earlier that afternoon, which to me is usually a sign that they're around. My sighting was a shock as it was totally unexpected, but as I mentioned before, he wasn't hiding. He was in almost full view, and he wasn't particularly hurrying to get out of the way either. It was a very positive experience. I would say over the last few years, things have been building into something here. I stay to the same area and visit as often as I can. At first, I would hear branches pinging behind me as I walk. Sometimes in the woods, the atmosphere would suddenly change and everything would become completely silent. and then I would hear huge thuds and thumps that you could feel with your feet. I can relate to this lady so much, and I know many others out there who have experienced the same. They've visited the woods over and over, and they've got to know it, and eventually strange things are starting to happen. When you visit the same woodland over and over, you tune into the rhythm of it. You notice the small changes that happen over time. You become keyed in. Oddities stand out to you, and you'll notice when other humans have visited. For me, it started with kind of rustles in the bushes, like scubbling noises, as if something was watching me and was kind of inching closer and closer each time. I would talk out loud in an effort to kind of soothe myself. I'd say things like, I know you're there, I can hear you. Never get a response. But I could never stay there long enough either to see what was watching me. Fear would have me scurrying for home. Then I'd see shadows, kind of dark and fleeting. And I always wondered if they were testing me somehow or trying to scare me out of there. I never knew which one it was. I'd see fast-running figures, and they're always in my peripheral vision. Still see them now. I hear fast-running feet, and pine cones and stones and weird whistles and vocal noises and all manner of oddities. I would find that when I'd visited so many times, I would know if the woods were empty as well. They felt different to me somehow. Many months can go by with this empty feeling. And then, once again, the atmosphere changes. The woods come alive and the adventures begin again. The description of the hunched position comes up over and over in other reports here in the UK and in air. I've also heard from others who have reported their experiences with the 2D beings, shadow folk some people call them. We could be dealing with a dimensional being that each witness sees in the form it chose for that moment. Controversial, I know, but it's a possibility. We have to consider it. We don't have all of the answers. We can preach all day about them being flesh and blood, but I've seen, experienced and heard far too many things for me to stick with that opinion now. My opinion's changed greatly. But it doesn't matter, does it? What, where, how, the questions that we all have, we don't have a definitive answer for them. They seem to be using the energy of the earth somehow, and the ley lines, and they seem to be tapping into that energy with grounding sticks and TP-like structures, some of which emit EMF or strengthen signals and almost block them. A strange conundrum. But you listen to reports where they are distinctly flesh and blood, where they are hunting animals, taking them down, where they're seen eating. But then you have reports where something very strange will happen. People have missing time. They'll have completely no knowledge of the experience for many decades, and then suddenly it will all, come to them again. There are lots and lots of reasons why it could be either or. There are many areas in the UK where both kind of sightings happen. Scotland, for instance, we have a number of reports in Scotland where the wild man, whatever name you want to give them, are seen hunting. But we also have reports where, for instance, a lady is driving along in a car about 6 a.m. in the morning, there's no one around, and she sees what she describes as a Sasquatch-like creature, a hairy man, drinking from a puddle. And as he runs away, the car starts to turn, and it turns not just once, but 3 times. But everything in the car remains in exactly the same position as it was. She wasn't hurt, and she wasn't injured in any way. One of the reports that mentions this hunched-like figure happened in Bourne Woods in 2013, and the witness stated, I live in Spalding, Lincolnshire. About 5:30 p.m. I went to walk my dog at Bourne Woods. It was a cold night, a bit of rain just starting as I got there, so there weren't many people around. I went up to the lake area where there was a bench to rest before I moved on. But I know Bourne, and it has its fair share of big cat sightings, so I was always on the lookout because I love the cryptid side of things. I was hoping I'd see a cat, or a cat print. I sat there for a long time, and finally I decided to go and have a look around the trees back there. As I walked away from the bench, I could hear what sounded like 2 rocks being smashed together, in the near woods behind me. It was a kind of clacking noise, so I assumed some kids were mucking about. I just thought it was time for me to leave. But on the way back to the car, I realised something was following me. There was something keeping up with me in the trees to the side. I was being followed by someone making grunts, and it sounded like they were coughing and spitting. I don't think they were trying to be stealthy. I think I was supposed to hear it. So I turned around. I could not believe what I saw. There was a creature watching me from within the trees. It had reddish colour hair all over its body, and it was about 4 to 5 feet tall. But it was hunched over. It wasn't standing fully upright. It was also crouching with a stick in its hand behind a tree. It watched me for a second. It sized me up, and it moved off into the trees. And I don't know why, but I followed it. I just did that without thinking. I just walked off after it as it walked away, until it just seemed to vanish. It was nowhere to be seen. It was almost like it had sunk underground somehow. I finally realised I could be in danger, and I left scared and a bit confused, to be honest. Our next report takes us to Swannington, to the Grace Dew Priory, and this event happened in February of 2013, and our witness is Emma Adam, and she said, "I want to report something that happened to me and my sister a few years ago now, back in 2013. We still don't know to this day what we saw. I don't have a name for it, and I can't find anything on Google that matches it. Someone said it could be a red deer walking up on 2 feet, but that wasn't a deer. We were driving along Limby Hall Lane, which is in Swannington in Leicestershire, and it's just past the Grace Dew Priory. We decided on this route as it was new for us and we wanted to walk the dog somewhere different for a change. My sister lived in Eastwood, Nottingham at the time, so she came over and slept at mine. We were out on the lane and it was getting dark, but there was still plenty enough light to walk the dogs. I would say it was roughly around February, about 10, 11 p.m, something like that. My sister was the driver and I was the passenger, and our dogs were on the back seat. As we went down the lane, a man came out from the fields with 3 dogs, and he crossed the road into the woods to the side, and we thought nothing of it. We stopped the car to let them pass, as it's a single road and you can't turn your car around until you reach the rest stops, which we call pull-ins. After the man passed us, we went a few pull-ins along the road, still not wide enough to turn the car, so we decided to just keep going until we could turn around safely and then just head back. We carried along Limby Hall Lane for some time, and then in the distance and in the light of the car headlights, we could see something, and it was walking across the road, and it was walking strangely. It was very tall, I'd say at least 7 to 8 feet tall, and it looked injured, and it walked across the road slowly with a limp and an arched back. It was very wide, and it was all black, and the headlights didn't reach it properly. We couldn't get a really good look at his face. I said to my sister, "Stop the car, what the fuck's that?" And she said, "I have no idea." And she pressed her horn. And to our horror, this thing stopped in the middle of the road, and it turned and it stared at the car. I told my sister to put the main beam on, and she did. And this was still not enough to see it clearly. We couldn't light it up. The only thing that did was light up its eyes, and it was reflecting not just 2 eyes, but many. This thing had multiple reflective eyes, and it just stood there in the road for ages looking at the car. Then it walked with what I believe was a limp into the woods in the fields, and it was gone. After making this report, I was chatting with Emma, and I asked her about the eyes and where the extra eyes were on the body, and it was almost as if this creature was hunched and holding something in its arms, and they were reflecting light, so maybe not one creature with multiple sets of eyes, but one creature carrying a couple of young, possibly. Emma said, at that point, seeing that, we were bricking it. We pressed the central lock in, and we couldn't turn the car around. We had to go forwards to where that thing had stood. And as we went past the point where it went into the woods and the road was pitch black, my sister just floored it. Now, on telling people, they don't believe you. And they don't suppose they will until it happens to them. We Googled to find this creature, but we couldn't find anything that matched it. Well, I started to talking to Emma over a number of weeks, and she was absolutely terrified of those woods. But she was really brave, and she did start to go back, and she did find some really strange things. And she was managed to do some research in the area, and she found out that there are a number of underground tunnels that go from the priory and stretch quite a way. And she did manage to find a couple of other witnesses. So on the 30th of August 2016, she said to me, Deb, my sister and 3 friends are going back to Limby Hall Lane at night to investigate on, the sighting that we saw. And on chatting with my friend, we realised that her uncle saw the same thing as me and my sister. They saw the same that we witnessed on the road, but this time it was walking along the grass verge at night. His account is almost exactly the same as mine. It's in exactly the same area, on the same stretch of road. It happened just opposite Greystew Priory. He also saw a dark, crouched figure. No face could be seen as the figure was so hunched over. It had an arched back. It was coming towards him, almost heading for the car. And this was at the junction opposite the ruins. He turned left. He sped off quickly towards Roughborough. And now he will never drive past that area of the lane again. He avoids it at all times. Deb, this really needs looking into further. And I've looked consistently for somebody in Emma's area that could help her out. She's still local and she's still around there and she's still looking for somebody. So if you know the Swannington area and Leicestershire, Lincolnshire, reach out, get in touch with me by commenting below or by using the email in the description. And hopefully you can help Emma and investigate this case for her. But I hope you enjoyed that. So until next time, good night everyone.